SAGES Stories.
Welcome to today's episode of SAGES Stories, the official podcast of SAGES, the Society of American Gastrointestinal and Endoscopic Surgeons. Please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you can stay up to date with our most recent episode, and enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. It's time for episode 7 of SAGES Stories, where we shine the light on some of SAGES' most impactful leaders. I'm your co-host, Dr. Kevin L. Hayek, coming to you from frigid Cleveland, Ohio.
And I'm Dr. Shirin Tofai in not as frigid LA, but Kevin, we are having a cold wave coming through. So no joke, I am wearing thermal underwear under my scrubs.
I don't believe it. I heard that people who live in Southern California actually get 30% more out of their lives than those of us here in the Midwest.
Really?
Yeah, apparently it's because they never talk about the weather in places like Southern California because it's always 70 and sunny. Whereas in places like Ohio or Minnesota or Wisconsin, for that matter, makes up about 30% of our conversation, the weather. So
there you go. Yet another reason for you to move out to the West. But you will lose that 30% in the taxes you'll have to pay here.
Yeah, see, we gain it back. Our money. Time is money. Well, maybe someday. In any case, we are excited for today's episode where we have changed up the format somewhat to include 2 fantastic guests. I guess we feel like we were starting to get the hang of this side hustle, as John Mellinger called it. So we can start to spread our wings a little bit.
That's right. Pretty soon, I think we should be fully syndicated show. What do you think?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
All right. Meanwhile, we are thrilled to welcome on today's show both doctors Archana Ramaswamy and Jake Greenberg. I think I picked them because they are the hernia surgeon buddies of mine. And of course, hernia surgeons rock.
Ooh.
And by the way, they also happen to be the program co-chairs of the SAGES National Meeting, which will be held this year, March 16th through 19th, 2022 in Denver, Colorado. We will dig into what's in store for the annual meeting a bit later. But first, let me introduce Dr. Jake Greenberg. He is most recently professor of surgery and director of the Augusta University Comprehensive Hernia Center. Jake completed his medical school training at the University of Pennsylvania and his general surgery residency at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. You may have heard about some of these Ivy League institutions. Very nice pedigree, Jake. Congrats.
Thank you.
He then went on to complete a fellowship in minimally invasive surgery and bariatric surgery at the University of Massachusetts. Following that, he was at the University of Wisconsin for 10 years, where his roles included program director of the general surgery residency and medical director of the UW, University of Wisconsin Comprehensive Hernia Center. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you very much for the incredibly kind introduction.
And in this corner, we have Dr. Archana Ramaswamy, who is also professor of surgery, but at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. There, she also serves as the associate program director of the general surgery residency program, as well as the surgery medical student clerkship director. Archana started a little further north at the prestigious McGill University in Montreal, where she completed both medical school and general surgery residency. After a few years in private practice, she moved south to Emory, where she completed a minimally invasive surgery and bariatric surgery fellowship. As mentioned, she is now settled as faculty at the University of Minnesota. During her journey, she also obtained a healthcare MBA from St. Thomas in Minneapolis. In addition to many other roles, she is also on the board of SAGES and the American Hernia Society. Welcome, Archana.
Thank you very much.
So congratulations to both of you. You are the first duo on SAGES Stories. So bear with us as we try and tackle this format. Kevin and I like to talk. And
we like to hear people talk too.
We also like to hear your stories. So we will try and keep this podcast within a reasonable time, because I personally can talk to you two forever. So you're great people. I'm so excited to have you on this podcast.
Well, we are very excited to be here. and feel privileged. And I at least am a little intimidated based on the pedigree of the folks that you have so far interviewed.
You're right
Agreed.
up there. You guys are
Agreed.
right up there.
So as you may know, our podcast, SAGES Stories, we really like to focus on the story of our guests. We go to so many meetings and we learn about surgery and medical care. And we sometimes miss learning about the people who are involved in our society and those that are really pushing for advancement in our field. So Jake, why don't you go first? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? What were some of the highlights of your journey so far? And then hopefully you'll end up in telling us what made you move to Georgia very recently.
Yeah, so I was born and grew up in Philadelphia, in a suburb just outside the Northeast. My father was an attorney in Philadelphia. My mother was a piano teacher, and I have three siblings: an older brother, younger brother, and youngest sister. We all started mandatory piano lessons at like the age of 5 or 6, and then everyone started picking up different instruments along the way because we had a very, very musical background in our family with my mom and brothers.
I'm gonna make our kids listen to this now. Jake.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
great.
So
Yes.
my mom's brothers were pretty famous jazz musicians. And so my whole life I wanted to be a musician. That was what I wanted to do through like high school. And as I was applying to colleges, I was applying to music schools and also to universities. And my uncles, the jazz musician, said, look, you're a smart kid, like don't be a musician. It's not a good lifestyle. You're constantly away from your parents. One of them had actually, unfortunately, been a heroin addict at times. And they said, be a professional and then have this be, again, your side hustle. And I took those words to heart. I studied music actually at Penn. So that was my major because it was still my passion. But did all the requirements for pre-med, and at that point sort of was just on the pathway towards medical school and surgery.
During your time when you were applying, there was one research paper that came out that showed that the best medical students are the ones that play an instrument. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I mean, I it's interesting, as a program director, that was always something that I looked for. Like I always looked for people that were musicians or athletes or really like had some sort of skill set where they had to learn how to practice. And ideally practice something that also had eye-hand coordination, which is both music and sports. But anything where they learn how to practice, I think they really learn how to learn from their mistakes, continue to improve. And I think that makes the best residents to train. So I totally agree.
Yeah.
And then in med school, I like wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something in surgery. But I, at the time, like looked around at some of the general surgery attendings, and many of them were divorced or on their second or third wives. It was a pretty malignant program. And I was like, that doesn't look great. So I looked at plastics, looked at ortho, ENT, and I just couldn't find anything I liked. And then I found a mentor who was a colorectal surgeon at Penn, fairly young attending, but had really taken to laparoscopic colectomies. And it was sort of the first exposure to real MIS cases that I got to see. And I just fell in love with those procedures. And then also, honestly, with him, I just thought he was an ideal role model. He was an excellent physician. He was a family man, married with 3 kids, and really happy and took great care of his patients and was doing all this cool, minimally invasive stuff. And I was like, all right, I want to be that.
Who was that surgeon?
His name's Howard Ross.
Wow.
He was the program director at Temple for a while. And is now a chief of surgery at a hospital in New Jersey, and it escapes me, but a close friend and mentor to today, actually. So we've stayed in touch. And then when I got to residency, I thought I was going to do colorectal because I just wanted to be him. Went all through the years of residency planning to do that, and was filling out an application in colorectal surgery. And my wife, who is a breast surgeon, said, you don't like colorectal surgery. You actually like laparoscopy and MIS, and you should do MIS. And I just, as a, dutiful husband, said, aye, Captain, I'll switch my application.
Well done. Well done.
I take advice and feedback. So, and then that was it. Went to UMass, where I had an incredible experience with all the faculty there, and John Kelly, who was the fellowship program director. And then my wife got recruited to UW right around that time, and it was a great job for me there too. And it was a fantastic 10 years with great people, great partners. just a wonderful place to live, and a lot of personal and professional happiness and success. And then my wife got recruited to be chair of surgery at MCG, which is why we're now down in Georgia. And so far, so good.
Yeah, we all love your wife.
I do too. Most of the time. Actually, all the time. This is recorded. Crap.
Yeah, this is recorded. Yes, all the time. Yeah. That's great. All right, your turn, Archana. So I'm sensing we're going to hear a little bit about a Canadian upbringing, if I'm not mistaken. You won't be the first Canadian on the podcast, as you know. But can you also share a little bit about growing up and maybe some key points in your journey?
Sure. So I was actually born in India, but my parents moved to Montreal when I was 5. So I grew up in Montreal, and as much as you hear about Indian people, expecting their children to be doctors or engineers, I'm not quite sure that my parents had such expectations for me, and nor did I really. My main goal when I was a teenager was that I really loved hockey. And my parents would not let me play because they said that was not a game for a girl. And I was like, I love hockey. How do I get the closest to my favorite hockey team, the Montreal Canadiens, who, yes, I know they suck this year, but they have won 23 Stanley Cups.
They have, yeah. That's enough. That's enough. Yeah.
No, it's not. But regardless. And at that point, somehow, the way the teenage brain works or does not work, I decided I was going to be a sports medicine doctor and be the team doctor for the Montreal Canadiens and be with them at all times.
So was that in your personal statement? Was your personal statement rushing out onto the ice to get the cleat or the blade out of someone's side,
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I don't remember my personal statement anymore. It's been that long, but I don't think I went into details about my stalkerish love of hockey. But so I went to medical school at McGill, and then I stayed there to do my residency. And throughout my residency, I'm not really quite sure I knew what I wanted to do after. I loved residency, and I just kind of enjoyed every moment of it. And there one of my main mentor there was Jerry Freed, who of course all of you know as a past president of SAGES. When I was a PG Wi-Fi, just kind of wandering along, just loving life, but not knowing what I wanted to do, he kind of sat down. I'm not even sure that he sat down. It was one day in the OR, he's like, "What are you going to do next year?" I'm like, "I don't know. Maybe I'll get a job." And he's like, "I think you should do this." He's like, you're good at this. You should do this MIS stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, well, okay, sure." If that's what you say. It was too late to apply for fellowship that year. And so I kind of went off and did some locums, did some schoolwork towards a master's in epidemiology, which I never finished because I then got into a fellowship. And so that's when I went down to Emory and there met some other mentors, and have just been super fortunate, honestly, in my life in terms of meeting people who have just totally given me amazing opportunities.
And it's like way up north, so you're kind of close to Canada.
Yes,
you can throw a stone and hit it.
Yeah. Minnesota is actually it's a good I think 5 to 7 hours from the border, even though it seems like we're very far north.
Such a big state. It's so big.
McGill is amazing. My mentor in undergrad was from McGill, and I just adored him, and so I actually applied to McGill just for him. And so yeah, what a great institution. Okay, let's talk about your families, if that's okay with you. A lot of the common theme we seem to have is, surgeons and their families. I've met both your families. You got cute kids, Archana. It's really great. Maybe the two of you will be willing to share a little bit about your families and how they integrate with your life. Maybe Archana, you can start that.
So Sharon, you remember my kids as being cute. That's not them anymore. It's been that long since you've seen them.
They're
all grown up.
They're all grown up. Yeah.
They tower over me, and we'll be leaving the house
Nice.
this year.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
I have two boys, twins, who will be 18 in less than 3 months.
We have twins all the time. Everybody has twins on our show. Joe
Right?
Belinsky had the 2 twins, another set of twins. This is amazing.
Joe, however, does everything to the extreme and had 2 sets of twins. I only had 1. But yeah, and so it's as everybody says, right? The hours are long and the years are short, and that's exactly how I feel in terms of how things have gone with my kids.
Where are they going next year?
So that's still in the works right now.
Yeah.
They have not heard back from all of the places that they've applied to. So we'll see. There is a good chance one of them may leave the country.
Wow.
And not because of extradition papers or anything like that. Just
we just wanted to clarify that. Yes. Good. Please. Thank you. Jake, how about you?
So we have 3 kids, about to be 15-year-old daughter who is in 9th grade, a 13-year-old daughter, and then an 8-year-old son. All 3 of them are incredibly different kids, but all very, very awesome in their own individual ways. The oldest and youngest are a lot like me, very sort of outgoing, very gregarious, very talkative. The middle one is the physical and mental and psychological spitting image of her mother. She is incredibly smart, but much more just kind of like chill and introverted, and is happy to sit up in her room and build like worlds out of Legos. But all 3 are just great kids and have done really an incredible job of adapting to a new city and moving, like basically right in high school and middle school, which is, I think, a tough time for girls at baseline, but they've really done an incredible job with the move, and they're super fun to be around. So they're great.
So obviously, I'm sure family takes up a fair amount of your time. And Jake, we heard a little bit about music. What are some other things you 2 like to do when you're not in the OR, you're not in the office? Jake, why don't you start?
Definitely family and music are sort of like the 2 big things. I love going to live concerts when they are COVID free. I like golf, spend a lot of time on a golf course. I think it's a nice way to ruin a good walk. And we used to love to travel and eat out and do all the things that we used to do before the pandemic, which have been put on a little hold, but hopefully we'll be starting back again now as things kind of open up and this gets better and better. So definitely like to stay active and with our family and out and about as much as possible.
How about you, Archana?
So I like the solo sports of gardening and cooking, and really, I often say I think I could have been a stay-at-home mom if I could have just spent all my time doing that, which is, of course, not what stay-at-home moms do. They're managing so many other things. And otherwise, as group events with my family, we really love to travel. And that's really what we do a lot of. We've been fortunate enough, I think, to even be able to do some traveling during the pandemic, both within the US, which I think was a little bit of a new opportunity to us to start discovering that we actually love national parks. In the summer before the vaccine. And then since then, we've been slowly venturing out when it's been safe to go back to our world travels.
What are some of your favorite places you've been to?
We went to South Africa this last summer. A 2-week trip that was cut short by a week due to them going up to a higher level of lockdown. But I think that the safari experience that we had was absolutely mind-blowing to all of us. And we all love Iceland, which just, again, feels like you're on a different planet.
Yes, for sure. I was there this summer. It's like you're on literally a different
Mars.
planet. Yeah, Mars, for sure, Mars.
Well, a few different planets, depending on which area you go to, right?
Yeah.
And then I think honestly, last year we went to Yellowstone, and that was just absolutely mind-blowing for us.
Those, yeah, South Africa and Iceland are two places I have not yet been, so they're definitely on the list.
Yeah, highly recommend Iceland either during the summer when it's the warmest, or I guess it's around like November, December when you get the northern lights.
Yeah.
But it's really cold then, so you would never see me there.
Wondering, have you been there?
Yeah.
I've seen you at 50-degree
Shocking.
weather, Sharon, and
Yeah,
you
I
have like a
know.
parka on.
Yeah, you can tell
Shocking to
which
hear
one.
that,
You
yeah.
can tell which one I am. Well, I mean, I love your stories. You guys are both awesome people. I feel like we really struck the jackpot, having not just one but two hernia surgeons on today's show.
Oh my gosh.
Honestly, I was getting so tired of all the hepatobiliary questions that Kevin kept asking all the guests. It was getting a little redundant.
Oh man.
But on that note, both of you do have a very special interest in hernias. So obviously the best field in the world. So what kind of brought you to that part of general surgery, Jake?
That was honestly sort of just circumstance, to be honest. So the fellowship at UMass was definitely geared more towards bariatric. I did a lot of bread and butter hernias, a lot of small lap ventrals, lap inguinals. Did a very small handful of like endoscopic component separations while there, but like maybe 3 or 4, and that was about it. So didn't do a ton in fellowship. It was really much more sort of foregut and bariatric. But when I got to UW, there was absolutely no one doing hernias whatsoever, and so I sort of said, well, you know, I'm happy to do them. I actually enjoy it. I can do them both lap and open, so I'm happy to start seeing those patients. And then the floodgates just opened. So when I was there, Carla Pugh was a member of our faculty, and she was, I think, planning a SAGES hands-on hernia course along with Mike Rosen and Brent Matthews, and she asked if I would be one of the faculty members for it. And it was like, I think only like my first or second year in practice. I was still very, very junior. And because she sort of put me in that position, I got to meet a lot of hernia surgeons, started chatting with them. We started doing collaborative research projects. I was teaching, I think, the lap ventral station at that thing, and I was like looking over as Mike Rosen was doing a TAR so I could learn how to do that. And that was where I first saw one. And so that sort of, her looking out for me and being a great mentor as she is to so many people, I think put me in a position where I could continue to build my name and professional career around hernia because the practice was there. So it was one SAGES member supporting another SAGES member, which is great.
Yeah. And isn't that one of the main draws I feel of SAGES is there's so much family and camaraderie. I think we all have stories like that about someone supporting you to come in and get involved, even though you may have thought you're too junior or maybe not at the right level to play the role that you were playing, and then just get you involved, get your feet wet, and then here you are.
Yep.
Big man on campus.
No, I don't know about that, but it was definitely appreciated at the time, and I really feel was instrumental in helping me advance in the society, which has been great.
Yeah, and now you're program chair. I mean, it's such a great story. Archana, what about you? They always ask me, because I'm female, like, how'd you get into hernia surgery? So what's your story?
It's different, but somehow very similar to Jake's as well. One of my mentors in my fellowship was Bruce Ramshaw, who we all know very well. So he obviously was already a big figure in abdominal wall, and really so passionate about it, and gave that over to all of us as fellows. And the rest of my training was really foregut and bariatrics, and I loved all of them a lot. And so when Bruce actually got us to come up to Missouri, which is where I worked for 7 years, he was kind of like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I kind of like everything. And he was like, okay, well, great. And he's like, you can do bariatrics and you can do hernia. Of course, at that point, our chair was Steve Eubanks, so the forget was kind of gone. But it was, every now and then you'd get a little bit. But so it gave me a great opportunity that there I had a mentor who I'd worked with in fellowship, and then afterwards got an opportunity again to work with him when I was an attending. And then he used to just kind of invite me here and there to give talks. And then somehow I, just fell into that whole abdominal wall kind of gang and considered myself extremely lucky.
Yeah, that's great.
We're going to hear a little bit about the upcoming SAGES meeting in a few minutes, but before we get there, I think it's always interesting to hear how our guests got involved in SAGES and sort of how they got even more involved into committees and ultimately the board, for example. So when did you first join SAGES, and kind of talk a little bit about your SAGES journey, Archana?
So the first SAGES that I went to was actually before I started my fellowship, but I was really I didn't know what it was about very much, and I just went and I thought, wow, this is pretty impressive. And then the year of my fellowship, of course, we all went to SAGES, and it was a completely different experience. We all had we had presentations, and we were with faculty who knew other people there, and you were just kind of like, wow, is this the in crowd? This is a pretty darn cool in crowd. You were a fellow, and you were like hanging out with all of these people who were part of the leadership. And then the main event happened, and I was like, this is interesting. But they seem like fun people. And then after that, I started getting invited to teach some of these SAGES Fellows courses once I started working in Missouri. And I said, you know what, I love doing this, but I want to be more involved. And I went to Steve Eubanks, who was president that year and was my chairman. And I said, hey, Steve, I want to get more involved in SAGES. How do you think I should do this? And he's like, well, I'll put you on a couple of committees. He's like, do you know what you want to do? I'm like, no. And he's like, that's fine. I'll just pick a few and I'll put you on those committees. And I was like, okay. And so that's how I started. And at first, those first few committee meetings, I had absolutely no idea what was going on, and really trying to figure out where I fit in. And then, projects would come up and I'd be like, you know what, this sounds really interesting. Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to do this. And I know you've heard this from a lot of your other guests, and it's really so much of SAGES is showing up and picking something that's interesting to you and following through on either the asks or just where you want to take it. And then after that, of course, the staffers do the rest. You come up with an idea and they're there to completely support you to make it happen.
Yeah, it's a super efficient society, I must say that. And Jake, at what level did you get involved at SAGES? When was your membership?
So I joined, I think, as a chief resident. Ashley Vernon, who was an MIS faculty member at the Brigham, I think, wrote my letter of support from the faculty. And then actually, I as a fellow, I am pretty sure I did not go to the SAGES meeting as a fellow, because I think I went to ASMBS and presented there a bariatric talk. So I think I missed SAGES that year. So my first meeting was my first year in practice. And at that meeting, it was, I think, the San Diego SAGES, and Scott Melvin was the president. John Gould, when we were being recruited to UW, John Gould was the section chief of MIS and was going to be my boss. But during the time that we got recruited and when we actually got there, he moved to MCW. So I actually ended up sort of taking his job over. But we had been in touch and I had met him a bunch of times. And so at that meeting, he introduced me to Scott Melvin and told Scott to please put me on a committee. And so I ended up on the publications committee, which was chaired at the time by Brian Jacob, who I went to summer camp with as a kid.
I want pictures. I want
yeah,
pictures.
I hope those have all been stricken from the record, but it's true. And Scott Davis, and then continued to just volunteer for stuff in that committee. Ended up on the hernia task force and on the raft committee. And again, just kept trying to volunteer to do stuff. And as Archana said, I think the great thing about this society is as soon as you're on a committee, if you step up and do the work, people acknowledge it and you just keep advancing. And it is really very much a meritocracy. And I think the more that you put into it, the more you take out of the society as well. And I think it's just a really special society in that regard, because it doesn't feel like a little, as Archana said, sort of like the in crowd, like the whole society is the in crowd, right? Once you're in, you're in. And I think if you show up, step up, do some work, you can really advance. And it's just great people, the best group of people. So it's
So true.
Really the surgical family is what it is.
So true. Yeah, I think it's going along that line. I think it's probably a reasonable time to let our listeners know that SAGES Stories actually came to be during Archana's tenure as chair of the communications committee. And while you recently handed those reins to the very able and awesome Kelly McFarland, can you tell us a little bit about, chairing the communications committee and why the heck did you agree to let us do this podcast?
What were you thinking?
Well, so the years that I was chair of the communications committee, there'd be various different ideas that would come up. And almost every single idea that came up, and this is what I love about SAGES, if there's somebody who's willing to do the work, SAGES will support it. And so all of the other things that we did within that committee was somebody came up with the idea and everybody else was like, okay, how could we make this work? And then as long as you found one or two champions for it, was a run with it, and the committee will support you and the SAGES staffers will support you. So for me, when the podcast idea came up, and then I kind of looked at the two of you and I was like, oh my God, I can't imagine anybody else who would, first of all, volunteer, and second of all, be able to actually do this. There was really no question. And it wasn't even a hard sell when I took it to the board. It's just like, hey, so our next thing is we're going to do podcasts. And they were like, oh, wow. We're like, yeah. So yeah, it's really the people. It's the people who came up with the idea that we knew it was going to work.
Does that mean, Kevin, you and I are champions? Did you just call us champions?
I think she
Yes.
did.
Are.
Those champions.
As the Olympics is coming up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's time for champions.
We are the champions. Awesome. So Jake, you and Archana are preparing for what some have already called the best SAGES meeting ever. So
Absolutely.
I think I only heard it from Archana, but that's okay.
And me.
And you.
Yeah, we've heard it from two people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Can you tell us what you're going to be putting together for the national meeting? What goes into pulling it off during this kind of very weird time in our life?
Yeah. So honestly, the work of creating the meeting is sort of a well-oiled machine, right? Because SAGES has been doing this so well for so long. And by SAGES, I mean Carrie Ahern, who is the SAGES staffer who you get all the emails from about the meeting. She's an incredible person, and is like so diligent and on the ball, and just knows her way around the meeting and what you have to do. And with her and Sally, everything just works really smoothly. To me, like there were several parts of this that have been like incredibly intellectually fun and just interesting. The first was at the very beginning of this process, Archana and I had a call with Leanne where we just asked Leanne, like, what are your visions for this meeting? Like, what are you hoping to pull off? And she said in that meeting, she wants it to be welcome home SAGES, right? Even though the 2021 meeting is happening, there's going to be less of an international poll. There's going to be less people than usual. And she was really hopeful that the pandemic would be behind us, and this would be a welcome home and welcome back to all the international people that we haven't seen for so long. And to that end, we wanted to highlight some of the differences in the way that we do surgeries across the different continents. And so there's a lot of sort of worldwide perspectives to certain disease processes in this year's program, with a lot of speakers from different countries representing what they do and why they do it that way. And then the other thing that we did was we pushed out to all the committee members a call for sessions and proposals. And what everyone turned back in was awesome. They turned in these great ideas about AI, coaching, video-based assessment, all these different educational stuff, great colorectal sessions, incredible HPB ideas. And then we said, okay, these look good. That's the title of your talk. Here are your session chairs, go plan it. And then as they started to come back in, we get to read these sessions. And I'm like, I want to go to that talk. I want to go to that session. I want to go to that session. They're at the same time. We're going to have to figure out what to do. Like the ideas of SAGES members were just so inspiring and great that the program honestly put itself together based on the work of everyone in the society. So it's been really fun to watch sort of like this idea turn into now a program that I think is going to be fantastic.
So Archana, as the program came together, what were some of the sessions that, when you looked at them, made you smile? And not the hernia ones, because I know those always make you smile. Some of the non-hernia sessions that you're like, wow, these are going to be great. And these are ones that I think are going to impact our attendees in a pretty strong way.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were going to make it 90% hernia and 10% other stuff. But we decided, we could get around that.
By popular demand, of course.
Yeah, backed by popular demand.
I mean, it's always one of the top learning themes identified, actually. So we have a session about surgery in space. And
interesting. Okay.
Right. And so this we think is very different. It's going to be very interesting. I can't wait to go to it. Honestly, we are, I can't give too much away, but there will probably be an astronaut at this session, an astronaut surgeon. And then other than that, some other things that we really focused on as well are that one of the big themes that's come up in the last few years, and that is also on the forefront of Leanne's presidency, is DEI. So we have focused several sessions on DEI, as well as, wellness has come up both from when Horacio was president, kind of going on forward into John Mellinger's presidency. And so we're also focusing on some sessions on surgeon wellness. And these are, I'm of course super excited about the entire program, which is of course the best SAGES program ever. But these are some of the ones that I think we're the proudest of.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Denver will be a little bit cold, but that's okay.
I will bring you all kinds of warm weather clothes.
Just bundle up.
It's sunny at least usually. Yeah.
So this podcast is going to drop a few weeks before the meeting. Maybe you can address our audience, because some may still be on the fence about potentially making the trip and traveling. What would you say to convince them to come? Because I will be there. You will be there. Kevin will be there. Jake will be there. So there's at least 4 reasons for other people to join us. But seriously though, this is a serious topic, I'm sure, discussed at the board level. What do you have to say to our audience to convince them to come to Denver in person?
I think first and foremost, everyone has to do what they're comfortable with, right? In these times, there is no right answer to this. But I think that the best reason to come to SAGES is the people. The people make this society, and I think that's what makes it so special. And getting the opportunity to see your friends from across the country and across the world in one meeting is so much fun and invigorating. And I think you leave every SAGES meeting completely fired up about going home and doing all the great stuff that you've talked about and learned and seen your colleagues doing. But more importantly, you leave just kind of like excited about life, having seen all your friends and gotten to catch up with everyone. And that's hard to replace virtually. right? You can see all the talks, everything's going to be live streamed. You'll have access to everything, even as the meeting's going on basically this year, which is a nice new change, but it won't replace the interpersonal connections that you can make at this meeting, which is really what I think makes the society so fantastic.
And I think we're at that point now where we're recognizing that, as much as up till now, and I'm sure I will keep going on like this, we keep wanting it just to be all over and be in that post-pandemic world. None of us really know what that's going to be or if and when that's going to happen. And so it's starting to figure out how to safely have meetings during the pandemic. And we've definitely had a few, including SAGES in Vegas, where we've learned, right, that we can run meetings safely. And so we are, safety is an absolute requirement for our meeting, and we are hoping and expecting that we will be past this current wave when our meeting happens in March. And at the same time, we are requiring that all attendees of the meeting be vaccinated.
Great. I think another fun fact for our listeners is that the next segment is based on the "We Are the Sages" tune.
We are the world. We are the sages. We are the sages. Sing it, everybody. We are the ones who make it bright our day. So let's start treating.
Yay.
Which is actually the tune that Archana was lobbying for to be both the opening and the closing jingle
Right.
of this podcast. Isn't that right, Archana?
I heard you mention that in one of your previous podcasts. That was overruled by someone.
Oh, did we finally find out who that someone was? Episode 7. You heard it here first. In any case, for this segment, we'd like you to dig back into your memory banks and share with us your most fun, crazy, wild SAGES moment. Keep in mind that the podcast is still currently rated safe. So why don't you start, Jake?
Most fun, crazy SAGES moment. That's a tough question. There are a ton of them. Honestly, I think I think the first sing-off, right? The first sing-off when you don't know what you're going to see and what to expect, like, is just an eye-opening thing to see everyone up there just, having the best time while kind of taking themselves very lightly, especially when you take into account the fact that it's a lot of huge names in our academic surgical world. For me, honestly, one of the best was this past sing-off in Vegas, right? That was the first time I saw any live music in like 2 years. And I was seeing it in a room full of friends that I just cared deeply about. And so to get to do that again really was special. And coming at a time where I think everyone was probably a little bit mildly dysphoric, if not depressed, that was a great pickup, I think, for me and for a lot of other people. So I think that was just a fantastic event.
Yeah, that was very special in Vegas. The venue really made it very intimate too, which was nice. Archana, what was your favorite memory from SAGES?
So I love the main event. My only dislike is the actual sing-off portion of it. So
You were such a party pooper. I did not know this about you.
Strongly anti-sing-off.
She's like, why don't we have another session during that time? We should have a hernia session at that.
It's a Grinch.
Let me explain. I love music. I love listening to music. I love dancing. I love listening to Jake play guitar, because these are all people who are professional or just very talented at it. The sing-off is the opposite of that.
We might have to, this might get edited out. Actually,
It's going to be on the cutting room floor very quickly.
In the podcast.
That's right.
Editor's note: oh, this is staying in, and they're going to have to own it.
It's blasphemous, I think. How could you not?
Well, we've even had this conversation. There have been SAGES board meetings or actually leadership retreats, where one of the big topics of consideration is, should the sing-off continue? Everybody always looks at me and goes, "You cannot speak."
Yes. She recuses herself from that portion of the discussion.
There's a conflict of interest.
I get recused. I don't recuse myself.
That's really too bad. You know, this is
So
the
did you
first
share
time
one? Did
anyone's
she-
actually said anything negative about it.
Yeah. So did you share a memory, or you're just talking about the things you
No.
don't
So
like?
I love the main event. Every single main event is absolutely amazing.
Okay.
I'm going to share one which one that's probably most memorable for me is Vegas, not this one though, the last Vegas meeting, which was, the main event was in the House of Blues, which was like amazing. And then after that, you know, it's not like everybody wanders off to their hotels because it's Vegas. And I remember staying in wherever that was, and there was a couple of bars and everything else, and we had a nice time. I do recall one of our trainees, who shall remain nameless, had such a fun time that evening that the next morning he had a talk where he had no voice.
Ooh, wow.
Yikes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was the Bellagio.
Remember?
Yeah, I remember that one. You should have tracked where that unnamed trainee was doing all night. Did they have the same clothing on as the night before?
I don't recall that, but that unnamed trainee was out with all of us for most of that evening. The rest of us did not have an 8 a.m. talk.
Yeah, those were killers.
Please, listeners, that's a pro tip. SAGES Pro Tip 101 by Archana Ramaswamy. Yes.
This is true. We always learn so much from Archana. She's always full of, you know, such great information. Always learning something. These are great stories, guys. I love it. We are so grateful that we got to spend this hour with you. As we know, you have a lot of extra stuff outside of surgery going on in your lives, and it means so much to us that you did volunteer to dedicate your hour tonight with us. It just makes every SAGES episode of SAGES Stories so memorable. And I love you both. Thank you so much for joining us. And I can't wait to see you in person in Denver. That's March, 16th through 19th, 2022.
Can't
Well,
wait to
thank
see you guys.
you.
It's going to be so
Yeah.
much fun.
And that wraps up today's episode of SAGES Stories. You can view the show notes for additional information mentioned on the show. Also, please visit sages.org for membership information and for the most recent news from our society. Follow us on Twitter at @SAGES_updates. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. Tune in again next time, and remember, you can't spell minimally invasive surgery without SAGES.